The rain hammered against the windows of Harrison Grayson's corner office on the 42nd floor, but she barely noticed as she stared at the contract in front of her, wondering how she'd gone from finishing her master's degree in hospitality management to cleaning luxury hotel suites for minimum wage. Life had a cruel sense of humor. 3 months ago, she'd been walking across a stage in her cap and gown, diploma in hand, ready to conquer the world. Then her mother's cancer diagnosis came, followed by medical bills that insurance refused to cover. And suddenly, Harrison was taking any job she could find while sending out resumes that disappeared into corporate voids. The luxury cleaning service paid weekly, and that was all that mattered right now. She pushed through the revolving doors of the Grandstone Hotel at 6 in the morning, her supervisor already waiting with the day's assignments. The Grandstone was the kind of place Harrison had dreamed of managing one day. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, staff who wore tailored uniforms instead of polyester. Now she wore scrubs and carried a caddy of cleaning supplies. "You're on the executive suites today," her supervisor said, handing her a key card. "Floors 30 through 35. Some of them are long-term corporate rentals, so be respectful of personal items. Don't move anything on the desks." Harrison nodded, heading for the service elevator. The executive suites were actually her favorite assignment. Business people tended to be tidier than tourists, and they tipped better. She needed every extra dollar she could get. The first 3 suites went quickly. She was in a rhythm now, the work meditative in its repetition. Strip the beds, start the laundry, bathroom, dust, vacuum. Remake the beds with hospital corners tight enough to bounce a quarter. She just finished the 4th suite when she unlocked the door to suite 3407 and found herself face to face with a man in a towel. "I'm so sorry," Harrison stammered, immediately averting her eyes. "I knocked. The front desk said this suite was vacant this morning. Clearly they were wrong." His voice was deep, irritated but controlled. Not yelling, which she appreciated. She'd been yelled at plenty in the past 3 months. "I'll come back later," she said, already backing toward the door. "Wait." Something in his tone made her pause. "How long will it take?" She risked a glance up, keeping her eyes firmly on his face. He was probably in his mid-30s, dark hair still damp from the shower, strong jaw shadowed with stubble. There was something exhausted in his expression, dark circles under blue eyes that might have been striking if they hadn't looked so tired. 30 minutes if you're not in a rush," she said. "I can come back in an hour if you need the space." He checked his watch, a simple but expensive-looking piece. 30 minutes is fine. I have calls to make anyway. I'll stay out of your way." He disappeared into the bedroom and Harrison heard the door close. She stood there for a moment, then shook herself and got to work. The living area of the executive suite was immaculate except for a coffee mug on the desk and a laptop surrounded by papers. She cleaned around them carefully, not touching anything. The man emerged 15 minutes later, dressed in dark slacks and a white dress shirt, no tie. He'd rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms that suggested he didn't spend all his time behind a desk. He sat down at the desk without acknowledging her and opened his laptop. Harrison moved to the bedroom, grateful for the privacy. The bed was already made, she noticed. Not well, the corners weren't right and the decorative pillows were stacked haphazardly but made. She stripped it anyway and started fresh. She was smoothing the final pillow when he appeared in the doorway. "You don't have to remake a bed that's already made." "It's my job," she said simply. "Seems like a waste of your time. Seems like you're paying for the service either way." The words came out sharper than she intended and she winced. "Sorry, that was unprofessional." To her surprise, the corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "It was honest. I appreciate honesty." She finished with the bed and moved past him to collect her supplies. "I'm done. I'll be out of your way now." "What's your name?" The question caught her off guard. In 3 months of cleaning hotel rooms, exactly 2 guests had asked her name. Harrison Grayson." "That's an unusual first name. My mother liked it." She didn't mention that her mother had expected a boy, had already picked the name, and decided to use it anyway when Harrison arrived. Her mother had never been one to waste a good plan. "Knox Thornton," he said, extending his hand. She glanced at her own hands, still in cleaning gloves. "I'm not really in a position to shake hands right now." "Right." He lowered his hand, looking oddly awkward for someone who carried himself with such obvious authority. "Thank you for the cleaning." "Just doing my job," Harrison said, and let herself out. She thought about Knox Thornton on and off for the rest of the day. There had been something in his eyes, that bone-deep exhaustion she recognized from her own mirror. Whatever he did, it was wearing him down. The next morning, her supervisor handed her the same floors. "Thornton in 3407 requested you specifically," she said. "Must have tipped well." He hadn't tipped at all, actually, but Harrison didn't mention that. She worked through the other suites first, leaving 3407 for last. This time when she knocked, he called for her to come in. Knox was at the desk again, phone pressed to his ear, but he waved her in. She started in the kitchen area, wiping down counters that didn't really need it. "I understand the concerns, Marcus, but we can't delay the merger any longer. The board is getting restless." Pause. "No, I'm not coming back to Boston. Everything can be handled remotely." Another pause, longer this time. "Because I don't want to be there right now. That's reason enough." He hung up and scrubbed a hand over his face. Harrison focused on the coffee maker. "You like your job?" The question came out of nowhere. She turned, surprised. "Does anyone like cleaning hotel rooms?" "That's not an answer." "No," she admitted. "I don't like it, but it pays weekly and I need that right now." "What would you rather be doing?" She shouldn't be having this conversation. She should smile politely and go back to work. But something about the way he asked, like he genuinely wanted to know, made her answer honestly. "I have a master's in hospitality management. I'd rather be running a hotel than cleaning one." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Why aren't you?" "Because my mother got sick, and hospitals don't care about your career plans when they want payment. So I took the first job I could get that let me send out resumes during my lunch break." She set down the cloth she'd been holding. "Why are you asking me this?" "I'm not sure," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. "Maybe because you're the first person I've talked to in 3 days who isn't trying to manage me. I'm cleaning your bathroom. That's definitely a form of managing you." This time he did smile, a real one that changed his entire face. "Fair point." Harrison found herself smiling back before she caught herself and returned to work. She could feel him watching her as she moved through the suite, but it wasn't uncomfortable, just present. When she finished, he stopped her at the door. "Same time tomorrow, if you're still here." "I'll be here." It became a routine. Every morning for the next week, Harrison cleaned Suite 3407 while Knox worked at his desk or made phone calls. Sometimes they talked, brief exchanges that felt more substantial than they should have. She learned he ran a manufacturing company based in Boston, that he had 500 employees who depended on him, that he'd been at the Grandstone for 3 weeks and had no plans to leave. "Don't you need to go back?" she asked on the 5th day, dusting the bookshelf while he typed furiously at his laptop. "No. Your company has excellent department heads who can handle things without me hovering." He stopped typing, staring at the screen. "I needed distance." She wanted to ask from what, but the set of his shoulders told her not to push. Instead, she said, "Distance doesn't work if you're still on the phone 12 hours a day." "Are you criticizing my coping mechanisms?" I'm cleaning your room. I notice things. Like the fact that you order room service for every meal, you never leave the suite, and you've been wearing the same watch for 6 days straight. He looked down at his wrist, surprised. How do you know it's the same watch? Because I notice things, she repeated. When's the last time you went outside? I don't need to go outside. Everyone needs to go outside. You're living like a vampire. She picked up her caddy. There's a park 2 blocks from here. It has trees and fresh air and everything. Are you prescribing me sunshine? I'm suggesting that if you're going to hide from whatever you're hiding from, you should at least do it with vitamin D. She left before he could respond, but the next morning when she arrived at the suite, he was wearing running clothes. There's a park 2 blocks from here, he said, deadpan. Apparently it has trees. Revolutionary concept. Want to see if it's true? She gestured at her cleaning supplies. I'm working. Take a break. When's your lunch? Not for 4 more hours. He pulled out his phone, made a call. Hi, this is Knox Thornton in suite 3407. I need to speak with your housekeeping supervisor. Pause. Yes, I'll hold. He met Harrison's eyes while he waited. Hi, yes. Harrison Grayson is assigned to my suite today. I need her to run an errand for me, so I'm going to need her for about an hour. I'll make sure she's compensated for her time. Another pause. Great, thank you, he hung up. Problem solved. You can't just commandeer hotel staff. I'm a long-term guest paying premium rates. I can make reasonable requests. Consider this a reasonable request. He grabbed a jacket from the closet. Come on, show me these legendary trees. She should have said no. This was crossing about 15 different professional boundaries. But something about the challenge in his eyes, the first real spark of life she'd seen there, made her set down her caddy and follow him to the elevator. The morning air was crisp, the kind of October day that made you remember why people wrote poems about fall. They walked in silence for the first block, Knox setting a pace that suggested he actually did know how to exercise despite living in a hotel room for 3 weeks. Thank you, he said as they entered the park. For what? For being pushy. I wasn't pushy, I was moderately insistent. You told me I was living like a vampire, which was accurate. She sat down on a bench and he joined her. The park was mostly empty at this hour, just a few joggers and one man walking 3 dogs that were clearly walking him. Why are you really here? Harrison asked. And don't say distance. Nobody hides in a hotel room for 3 weeks just for distance. Knox was quiet for a long moment, watching the dog walker lose a battle with a fire hydrant. My wife died 2 years ago. The words hit Harrison like a physical blow. I'm so sorry. Everyone's sorry, that's all anyone says. I'm sorry, Knox. We're so sorry for your loss. If there's anything we can do. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But nobody can do anything, so they just keep saying sorry and looking at me like I'm going to break. Is that why you left Boston? I left because 2 years ago this week, I was planning her funeral. And everyone at the company, everyone in my life, they all remember that. They're all waiting to see if I'm going to fall apart again. He laughed, but it was a bitter sound. So I came here, where nobody knows me and I can just work and pretend the calendar doesn't exist. Harrison didn't say she was sorry, even though she was. Instead, she said, my mom's in stage 4 lung cancer treatment. She's never smoked a day in her life. Sometimes genetics just decide to ruin everything. Is that why you're cleaning hotel rooms? That's why I'm cleaning hotel rooms. She pulled her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. We were never rich, but we were okay. Then the diagnosis came, and suddenly okay wasn't enough. Insurance covered some of it, but not the treatment she actually needs. So I graduated with my master's, took a job that pays weekly, and I send resumes to every hotel management position within 100 miles hoping someone will give me a chance at something better. Have you gotten any interviews? 3. They all went well until they checked my references and found out my last job was housekeeping at a budget motel. Apparently that's not the trajectory they're looking for. She shrugged. It's fine. I'll figure it out. You're allowed to be angry about it. Anger doesn't pay medical bills. They sat in silence, watching the park come to life around them. It was strange, Harrison thought, how easy it was to talk to him. She'd known Knox for less than a week, but something about his own pain made hers easier to carry. I should get back, she finally said, before my supervisor thinks you actually fired me. Would she believe I fired you? You're paying for an executive suite. You could probably convince her you're secretly royalty if you wanted to. They walked back to the hotel, and Harrison finished cleaning his suite while Knox made more phone calls. But something had shifted between them, a foundation of understanding that hadn't been there before. At the door, Knox handed her an envelope. For your time this morning. She opened it and found $500 bills. This is too much. It's compensation for an hour of your time at consultant rates. I'm not a consultant. You have a master's degree in hospitality management. That makes you qualified to consult. He held up a hand when she tried to protest. Take it. Use it for your mother's treatment, and come back tomorrow. Harrison took the money because $500 was $500, and pride didn't pay for chemotherapy. The next morning, Knox wasn't at his desk when she arrived. Instead, he was standing at the window, looking out at the city. There's a hotel management position opening up, he said without turning around. The Grandstone is expanding, building a new luxury property downtown. They need someone to oversee the transition from construction to operation. It's a 2-year contract with the possibility of becoming permanent. Harrison set down her supplies slowly. How do you know that? Because I know the CEO. We went to college together. He turned to face her. I could put in a word for you. Why would you do that? Because you're qualified, you're clearly intelligent, and you deserve a chance. He crossed to his desk, picked up a business card. His name is Richard Chen. Call him, mention my name, and he'll give you an interview. She took the card with shaking hands. I don't know what to say. Say you'll call him today. Knox, I can't just, yes, you can. This is what networking is. Someone who has connections uses them to help someone who deserves the help. He smiled, and it was genuine. Besides, I'm being selfish. If you get a real job, I can take you to dinner without it being wildly inappropriate. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. You want to take me to dinner? I want to take you to dinner. I want to know more about you than I can learn in the 10 minutes a day you spend cleaning my room. I want to hear about your life, your dreams, what made you choose hospitality management in the first place. He took a step closer. But you work for the hotel, and I'm a guest, and I'm not going to be the creep who hits on the housekeeping staff. So get the job, and then let me buy you dinner. Harrison felt like she was standing on the edge of something, the ground solid behind her but nothing but air ahead. What if I don't get the job? You'll get the job. But if by some miracle Richard has completely lost his mind and doesn't hire you, then we'll figure something else out. He gestured to the card in her hand. Call him. She called from the hotel lobby during her lunch break, hands sweating as the phone rang. Richard Chen's assistant put her through immediately, and the interview was scheduled for the next day. Knox Thornton recommended you highly, Richard said at the end of their conversation. Any friend of Knox's is worth meeting. Harrison wanted to ask what he meant by that, why Knox's recommendation carried such weight, but she thanked him instead and hung up. The interview went better than she dared to hope. Richard was in his 40s, sharp and professional, and he asked questions that actually related to her education and skills rather than her employment gap. At the end of 90 minutes, he offered her the job on the spot. Knox said you were brilliant, Richard told her as they shook hands. He's never been wrong about people. Can I ask you something? Harrison said. Why does Knox's recommendation carry so much weight? Richard looked surprised. You don't know who he is. He said he runs a manufacturing company in Boston. Knox Thornton owns Thornton Industrial. They do aerospace manufacturing, government contracts, the whole 9 yards. The company's worth about $3 billion. Richard smiled at her expression. Knox is one of the most successful CEOs on the East Coast. He's also one of the most private. If he vouched for you, it's because he genuinely believes in you. Harrison left the interview in a daze. Knox was a billionaire. She'd been trading life stories with a billionaire while wearing cleaning gloves. She went straight to the grandstone, riding the service elevator up to the 34th floor. She knocked on suite 3407, and Knox opened the door still dressed in his work clothes, tie loosened, looking like he'd had a long day. How did it go? He asked immediately. Why didn't you tell me you're a billionaire? He winced. You talked to Richard. Of course I talked to Richard. He just offered me the job, and then he mentioned that you own a $3 billion company. She pushed past him into the suite. Were you ever going to mention that? Eventually. He closed the door. Does it matter? Does it matter? Knox, I've been treating you like a regular person. I am a regular person. You're a billionaire CEO hiding in a hotel room. That's not regular, that's eccentric rich guy behavior. She paced the length of the living room. I told you about my mother's medical bills. I took $500 from you like it was a windfall. Do you have any idea how embarrassing? Stop. His voice was firm enough to cut through her spiral. You earned that money. You gave me your time and your insight, and I compensated you for it. The fact that I have more money than you doesn't change the value of what you offered. Everyone must want something from you. Yes, he said simply. That's exactly what they want. Everyone in my life wants something. Investment opportunities, charitable donations, business partnerships, social connections. My own board of directors wants me to remarry so I seem more stable to shareholders. He sat down heavily on the couch. You're the first person in 2 years who just talked to me like I was human. Harrison sat down beside him, anger deflating into understanding. That's why you're here. That's why I'm here. In Boston, I'm Knox Thornton, CEO, widower, target for every social climber and gold digger in New England. Here, I was just a guy in a hotel room until you told me I was living like a vampire. She laughed despite herself. You were living like a vampire. I was, he agreed. Thank you for noticing. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Harrison said, I got the job. I knew you would. Which means you can take me to dinner now without it being inappropriate. He turned to look at her, something warm in his eyes. Tomorrow night, she agreed. Knox picked her up at 7 in a car that probably cost more than her college education. The restaurant was the kind of place where the menu didn't list prices, and Harrison was suddenly very aware of her simple black dress from Target. You look beautiful, Knox said as he held her chair, and the sincerity in his voice made her believe him. Dinner was easy in a way that surprised her. They talked about everything, her childhood in a small town in Pennsylvania, his rise through his family's company after college, her mother's stubbornness about accepting help, his wife's love of terrible reality television. She got me hooked on this show about people buying storage units, Knox said, smiling at the memory. I used to make fun of her for watching it, and then I'd end up on the couch beside her, completely invested in whether they found anything valuable. What was her name? Harrison asked gently. Lauren Matthews before we got married. She was a high school teacher, 10th grade English. She loved her students more than anything. His expression was soft, nostalgic rather than devastated. She was diagnosed with an aggressive brain tumor, 6 months from diagnosis to death. I had every specialist in the country look at her case, but there was nothing anyone could do. That's why you understood about my mother. That's why I understood. You can have all the money in the world and sometimes it still isn't enough. He reached across the table, taking her hand. How is your mother, by the way? Stable. The new treatment is helping, but it's a marathon, not a sprint. She laced her fingers through his, marveling at how natural it felt. She's excited about my new job. I called her right after the interview. What did she say? She said it's about damn time someone recognized my potential. And then she asked if Richard Chen was single. Knox laughed, a real sound of joy that made other diners turn to look. Is your mother always a matchmaker? Only when she's not busy being sick. She thinks I focus too much on work and not enough on having a life. Smart woman. They lingered over dessert, neither wanting the evening to end. When Knox finally drove her home to her tiny apartment in a neighborhood his car definitely didn't belong in, he walked her to the door. I had a great time tonight, Harrison said. So did I. He hesitated, then said, I'm going back to Boston next week. I can't hide here forever, and you were right about the vitamin D. I need to face real life again. Her heart sank, but she kept her smile steady. That's good. Your company needs you. Come with me, she blinked. What? Come to Boston with me. Not permanently, just for a weekend. Let me show you the city, introduce you to my life there. If you hate it, you can come back and we'll figure out the long-distance thing, but I think you should see it. Knox, we've known each other for 2 weeks. I know. And normally I'd be the first person to say that's not enough time, but Harrison, I haven't felt like myself in 2 years. These past 2 weeks with you, I've remembered what it's like to just exist without the weight of everything else crushing me. He took her hands. I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm asking you to spend a weekend with me and see if this thing between us is as real as it feels. She should say no. She should be practical and cautious and protect herself. Instead, she said, okay. His smile could have powered the city. Yeah, but I'm paying for my own plane ticket. The hell you are, I invited you, I'm paying. Knox, let me do this, please. He squeezed her hands. You can pay for something else if it makes you feel better, but let me buy you a plane ticket to come visit me. In the end, she agreed. And the following Friday she found herself on a first-class flight to Boston, trying not to think about how much this single seat cost. Knox met her at the airport, and just seeing him made her heart do complicated things. He was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, but he still looked like he belonged in a boardroom. Ready for the grand tour? He asked, taking her bag. Ready as I'll ever be. He showed her Boston like someone who loved the city, pointing out his favorite restaurants and the coffee shop where he'd spent most of college. His house was in a historic neighborhood, a beautiful brownstone that managed to feel like a home despite being worth millions. Lauren decorated most of it, he said as he showed her around. I haven't changed much, probably should, but it feels wrong somehow. Harrison could see Lauren's touch everywhere in the bright throw pillows and the bookshelf organized by color. It's beautiful. She had great taste. She did. He set Harrison's bag down in the guest room. I want you to be comfortable here. If you need anything, just ask. That night, Knox took her to a small Italian restaurant where the owner greeted him by name and immediately brought out bread that was still warm from the oven. You're a regular, Harrison observed. Lauren and I came here every Friday for 5 years. After she died, I couldn't make myself come back for 6 months. When I finally did, Marco sat down at my table and cried with me. Knox smiled at the memory. Now I come here once a month and we talk about life. Marco appeared then, a round man in his 60s with flour on his apron. Knox, and you brought someone. Finally, he turned to Harrison. I'm Marco. You must be special because Knox never brings anyone here. I'm Harrison. And I'm not sure about special, but I'm definitely hungry. Marco laughed and disappeared into the kitchen, returning with plates of pasta that smelled like heaven. As they ate, Knox told her more about his life in Boston, his friends, his work, the foundation he'd started in Lauren's name to support teachers. I never knew what to do with all this money, he admitted. Lauren was the one who kept me grounded, who reminded me that wealth was a responsibility. After she died, I threw myself into the foundation because it was the only way I could think of to honor her. She'd be proud of you, Harrison said. I hope so. He reached across the table, taking her hand. I'm glad you're here. Me too. The weekend passed in a blur of museums and walking tours, quiet mornings drinking coffee in Knox's kitchen, and long dinners where they talked until the restaurants closed around them. Harrison met some of Knox's friends, carefully chosen people who treated her warmly and didn't make a big deal about Knox finally dating again. Sunday afternoon, they were walking through Boston Common when Knox's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. I'm sorry, I need to take this. It's my COO. He walked a few steps away and Harrison sat down on a bench, watching families play in the park. When Knox returned, his expression was troubled. Everything okay? She asked. There's an issue with one of our government contracts. Nothing catastrophic, but I need to go into the office for a few hours and sort it out. He looked genuinely apologetic. I'm so sorry. This is your last day here and I'm abandoning you. Knox, you run a billion-dollar company. I understand that work happens. She stood up. Go. Do what you need to do. I can entertain myself. Come with me. To your office. Why not? You can see where I spend most of my time, and if you get bored, there's a cafe on the first floor that makes excellent coffee. He grinned. Plus, I want to show you off. So Harrison found herself in the executive offices of Thornton Industrial, surrounded by glass walls and expensive furniture. Knox's office took up a corner of the building, windows overlooking the city, and his desk was even messier than the one in his hotel suite had been. Sorry about the chaos, he said, already pulling up files on his computer. I think better when I can see everything at once. Harrison settled into one of the chairs across from his desk and watched him work. It was fascinating seeing this side of him. He was completely focused, authoritative on phone calls, making decisions that probably affected hundreds of people without hesitation. This was the billionaire CEO everyone else saw, and it should have been intimidating. Instead, Harrison found it impressive. After an hour, Knox's assistant knocked on the door. The board members are here for the emergency meeting. Knox looked at Harrison. This might take a while. Go, I'll be fine. But as the meeting stretched past 2 hours, Harrison found herself restless. She wandered the executive floor, looking at the photos on the walls. There was a whole section dedicated to company history, black and white photos of Knox's grandfather founding Thornton Industrial in 1952, pictures of the company's growth over decades. And then she found the personal section. Knox and Lauren at various charity events, Knox accepting awards, a candid shot of Knox and Lauren laughing at what looked like a company picnic. Lauren was beautiful, with warm eyes and a bright smile, and the way Knox looked at her in every photo made Harrison's chest ache. That's a lot to live up to, isn't it? Harrison turned to find a woman in her 50s standing beside her, studying the photos with a sad smile. I'm Margaret, Knox's assistant. You must be Harrison. Is it that obvious? Knox has been different since he came back from his trip. Lighter somehow. And when he asked me to clear his schedule this weekend, I knew something had changed. Margaret looked at the photo of Knox and Lauren. She was wonderful. Everyone here loved her. He clearly did. He did. That kind of love doesn't just disappear. Margaret turned to face Harrison fully. But it doesn't mean he can't love again. Knox has been stuck for 2 years, unable to move forward because he felt like moving on meant forgetting her. I think you've helped him understand that's not true. I'm not trying to replace her. Good. Because you can't, and you shouldn't try. Lauren was Lauren and you're you, and both of those things can be true. Margaret smiled. I'm glad he found you, even if he's too stubborn to admit how much he needs someone. The meeting finally ended around 7, and Knox emerged looking exhausted. I'm so sorry. This was supposed to be a quick fix and it turned into a whole thing. It's fine. Margaret and I had a nice chat. Knox glanced at his assistant, who gave him an innocent smile. Great. That's either very good or very bad. Very good, Margaret assured him. Now take your girlfriend to dinner before she realizes she can do better than a workaholic billionaire. Harrison laughed at Knox's expression as they left the building. I like Margaret. Margaret is a menace who's been with the company for 30 years and knows where all the bodies are buried. He took Harrison's hand as they walked to the car. What did you two talk about? Nothing bad. She just wanted to make sure I knew what I was getting into. And do you? Harrison stopped walking, turning to face him on the sidewalk as evening fell around them. I know that you're complicated. I know you're still grieving someone you loved deeply, and that's not going to just disappear. I know you're a workaholic who runs a massive company and probably puts too much pressure on yourself. She stepped closer. I also know that you make me laugh, that you saw me when I was invisible to everyone else, and that these past 2 weeks have been some of the best of my life. So yeah, I think I know what I'm getting into. Knox kissed her then, right there on the sidewalk with people walking past and the city alive around them. It was their first kiss, and it felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time. I'm falling for you, he said when they finally broke apart. I know it's fast, and I know it's complicated, but I'm falling for you, Harrison Grayson. Good, she said, because I'm falling for you too. They had dinner at a small Thai place near Knox's house, then stayed up late talking in his living room. Harrison's flight was early the next morning, and neither of them wanted the weekend to end. I'll come visit in 2 weeks, Knox promised. I have some meetings I can't move, but after that, I'm all yours. I start my new job tomorrow. I'm terrified. You're going to be amazing. Richard is lucky to have you. He pulled her closer on the couch. Call me tomorrow night and tell me how it goes. I will. When he dropped her at the airport the next morning, the goodbye felt harder than it should have after only 2 weeks. But as Harrison's plane took off, she found herself smiling. For the first time in a long time, she was excited about the future. The new job was everything Harrison had hoped for and more. Richard was an excellent boss, giving her autonomy while still providing support, and the project was fascinating. She was essentially building a hotel from the ground up, making decisions about everything from staff uniforms to room layouts. Knox called every night, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for just 10 minutes between meetings. They texted throughout the day, stupid jokes and photos of their respective disasters and occasional heartfelt messages that made Harrison's chest warm. 2 weeks later, Knox flew in for the weekend, and Harrison showed him her city the way he'd shown her Boston. They fell into an easy rhythm, and when he left on Sunday, they made plans for Harrison to visit Boston again in 3 weeks. This is working, Knox said at the airport. The distance is hard, but this is working. It is, Harrison agreed, and she meant it. 3 months passed in a blur of flights and phone calls and stolen weekends. Harrison's mother's health improved with the new treatment, stable enough that Harrison didn't wake up every morning terrified of bad news. Her job was going well, the hotel project on schedule and under budget, and Knox was becoming an essential part of her life. They'd moved past the early stages of dating into something deeper, comfortable and passionate all at once. He knew how she took her coffee, that she hated talking before she'd been awake for 30 minutes, that she stress cleaned when she was anxious. She knew he read thriller novels to unwind, that he was terrible at cooking but excellent at ordering takeout, that he still had nightmares about Lauren's death sometimes. They were sitting in Knox's kitchen on a Saturday morning in January, Harrison reading work emails while Knox made pancakes when he said, "Move in with me." She looked up from her phone. "What? Move in with me? Move to Boston." He flipped a pancake with more force than necessary. "I know it's a big ask, and I know you just started your job, but Harrison, I'm tired of saying goodbye to you every few days. I want you here. I want to wake up next to you every morning and come home to you every night. Knox, I can't just leave my job. I signed a 2-year contract. Richard and I talked. If you want to make the move, he'll arrange a transfer. Thornton Industrial is building a new headquarters complex, and we need someone to oversee the hospitality aspects, the executive dining facilities, the conference centers. It would be a similar role, similar pay, and you'd be working for my company." He set down the spatula, coming to sit beside her. "I know it's complicated mixing business with personal, but we can make it work. We have people in place to prevent conflicts of interest." Harrison's head was spinning. "You talked to Richard about this without asking me first." "I asked him if it would be possible hypothetically. I wanted to know if I was being completely unreasonable before I brought it up." He took her hands. "I'm not trying to control your life or your career. I'm trying to find a way for us to be together without you having to sacrifice everything you've worked for. What about my mother? Boston has excellent cancer treatment centers. We can move her here too, get her set up with the best oncologists in the city. I'll cover all the medical expenses." "Knox, you can't just I can and I want to. Harrison, I love you." The words came out fierce, certain. "I'm in love with you and I want you in my life permanently, not just weekends and phone calls. I want everything." Her eyes filled with tears. "I love you too." He kissed her, soft and sure, and when they broke apart, he was smiling. "So is that a yes? It's a let me think about it for 24 hours before I make a huge life decision. I can live with that." Harrison called her mother that afternoon, expecting protests. Instead, her mother laughed. "Honey, I've been waiting for you to admit you wanted this. That man is crazy about you and you light up every time you talk about him. Of course you should move to Boston. What about you? I'm sick, not helpless. If you set me up with good doctors in Boston, I'll be fine. Better than fine, because I'll get to see you happy." Her mother's voice turned serious. "Lauren wouldn't want him to be alone forever, sweetheart. He's allowed to move forward and you're allowed to be the person he moves forward with." 24 hours later, Harrison told Knox yes. The next 2 months were chaos. Harrison worked with Richard to ensure a smooth transition on her project, training her replacement and documenting every decision. Knox arranged for her mother's move, finding an apartment near his house and setting her up with an oncology team at Mass General. Margaret helped Harrison find a position within Thornton Industrial that utilized her skills while keeping her separate from Knox's direct oversight. And through it all, Harrison and Knox grew closer. They had their first real fight about her insisting on paying rent, which ended with a compromise where she'd pay for groceries and utilities instead. They navigated the complexities of Knox's world, the social obligations and charity events where everyone wanted to know about the new girlfriend. They spent a weekend going through Lauren's things, boxing up some items for charity and keeping others, Knox crying as he told Harrison stories about his late wife. "I'll never be her," Harrison said as they sat surrounded by boxes in what had been Lauren's office. "I don't want you to be her." I loved Lauren and I'll always love her, but I love you too, differently but just as deeply. He pulled Harrison close. You taught me that I could do that loving you doesn't diminish what I had with her. By March, Harrison was fully moved into Knox's house. Her things mixed in with his. Her mother settled in her new apartment and responding well to treatment. The new job was challenging and rewarding, and Harrison found she loved the corporate side of hospitality as much as she'd loved the hotel side. They were at a charity gala in April when someone made a comment about Knox moving on quickly, loud enough for both of them to hear. Harrison felt Knox tense beside her, but before he could respond, she turned to the woman with a bright smile. Actually, Lauren died 2 years ago. That's a pretty reasonable amount of time to grieve before dating again, don't you think? Or did you have a specific timeline in mind? She kept her tone light, almost cheerful, but the woman paled and hurried away. Knox stared at her. Did you just eviscerate someone at a charity gala? She was rude. I was informative. He laughed, pulling her onto the dance floor. I love you so much. I love you too. Even when your friends are nosy. Especially when you defend me with a smile. They danced until the band stopped playing, and when they got home, Knox led her to the living room and got down on one knee. I had a whole plan for this, he said, pulling a ring box from his pocket. I was going to take you to Marco's restaurant, recreate our first date, make this big romantic gesture. But Harrison, I don't want to wait. I don't need the perfect moment because every moment with you is perfect. Harrison was crying before he even opened the box. You came into my life when I was hiding from everything, and you saw me anyway. Not the CEO, not the widower, just me. You challenged me and supported me and loved me even when I wasn't sure I deserved it. He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. I know I'm complicated. I know I come with baggage and a demanding job and a history that will always be part of who I am. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? Yes, she said, dropping to her knees in front of him. Yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, and they stayed there on the floor, holding each other and crying happy tears. They got married in September, a small ceremony in Marco's restaurant with just close friends and family. Harrison's mother was there, healthy enough to dance at the reception, and even some of Knox's employees came to celebrate. Margaret cried through the entire ceremony, and Richard gave a toast about how Knox had called him 2 years ago from a hotel room, saying he'd met someone extraordinary. I asked him how long he'd known this woman, Richard said, raising his glass. And he said 1 week. I told him he was crazy. Turns out he was just in love. For their honeymoon, they went back to the Grandstone Hotel, booking the executive suite where they'd first met. The hotel staff treated them like celebrities, and Harrison laughed at the irony of staying in a place she'd once cleaned. Think about how far you've come, Knox said as they stood at the window, looking out at the city. From cleaning this room to being a senior director at a Fortune 500 company. Think about how far you've come, Harrison countered. From hiding in this room to actually living again. You did that. You brought me back to life. We did that together. They spent the week in the suite, venturing out for meals but mostly just enjoying being alone together. On their last night, Knox suggested they walk to the park where they'd had their first real conversation. They sat on the same bench, Harrison leaning against Knox's shoulder. I was so angry at the world back then, Knox said. Angry that Lauren died, angry that life kept going without her, angry that everyone expected me to just move on. Are you still angry? No, I'm grateful. Grateful that I had Lauren, grateful that I survived losing her, grateful that I found you. He kissed the top of her head. You taught me that I could trust again. Trust that the future could be good. Trust that opening my heart wouldn't destroy me. Trust that love was worth the risk. Harrison turned to look at him, this man who'd gone from a stranger in a hotel room to her husband. "You taught me something too." "What's that?" "That sometimes the best things in life come when you're not looking for them. I was just trying to survive, pay my mother's bills, get through each day. And then you were there and suddenly survival wasn't enough. I wanted to actually live. And now I'm living." "Really living? With you?" They stayed in the park until the stars came out, talking about their future. Knox wanted kids eventually, maybe 2 or 3. Harrison wanted to keep advancing in her career, maybe run her own company someday. They wanted to travel, see the world together, build a life that honored both their pasts and their future. When they finally walked back to the hotel, hand in hand, Harrison thought about the woman she'd been 8 months ago. Desperate, exhausted, invisible. Knox had seen her when no one else did, but more importantly, he'd helped her see herself. 3 years later, Harrison stood in the lobby of her own hotel, watching the staff prepare for the grand opening. Knox had surprised her on their 2nd anniversary with the announcement that he'd bought a property in downtown Boston, and if she wanted, it was hers to run. "You bought me a hotel," she'd said, stunned. "I bought you an opportunity. What you do with it is up to you." She'd thrown herself into the project, designing every detail, hiring staff, creating an atmosphere that was both luxurious and welcoming. The Grayson house was set to open in 2 weeks, and advance bookings were already sold out for the first 3 months. Knox found her in the lobby, slipping an arm around her waist. "How's it looking?" "Perfect. Terrifying. Perfect and terrifying. You've got this. You were literally born to do this." "I was born to clean hotel rooms, apparently, and then I married a billionaire who bought me my own hotel. This is a very specific career trajectory." He laughed, the sound she'd fallen in love with years ago. "You earned every bit of this. The hotel just gave you the platform to show everyone what you're capable of." Their daughter's babysitter called then to say that Emma was asking for them, and they headed home to their expanded brownstone. Emma was 2 years old, with Knox's blue eyes and Harrison's determination, currently staging a protest about bedtime. "Daddy, I'm not tired," she announced as Knox scooped her up. "That's exactly what tired people say, sweetheart. Mommy, tell Daddy I'm not tired." Harrison kissed her daughter's forehead. "You're exhausted, baby girl. Let's read a story and then it's sleep time." They read 2 stories, Emma's eyes drooping by the second, and by the time they turned off the light, she was already asleep. In their own bedroom, Harrison changed into pajamas while Knox checked his phone for any late-night work emergencies. "Margaret says the London office handled the contract dispute," he said. "I don't need to fly over next week, which means you can come to the grand opening. I wouldn't miss it for anything. This is your night." He set down his phone, pulling her close. "I'm so proud of you, Harrison. Everything you've built, everything you've accomplished, you're extraordinary. I had a good teacher. Someone once told me I deserved a chance and he made sure I got it. You would have made it without me. It just might have taken longer, maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to." She kissed him, slow and deep. "I love you, Knox Thornton. I love you, Harrison Thornton, even when you argue with me about buying you hotels. Especially when I argue with you about buying me hotels." They fell asleep tangled together, and Harrison dreamed about the future. The grand opening of her hotel, watching Emma grow up, maybe having another child or 2. Growing old with Knox, building a life that was messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. The Grayson house opened to rave reviews, and Harrison found herself interviewed by hospitality magazines, asked to speak at industry conferences. Knox was her biggest cheerleader, showing up at every event, telling anyone who would listen about his brilliant wife. Harrison's mother lived to see her granddaughter's 5th birthday. healthy enough to be an active presence in Emma's life. When she finally passed peacefully in her sleep, Harrison grieved but also felt grateful for the extra years they'd had together, years that wouldn't have been possible without Knox's help. They had 2 more children, a son named Lucas and another daughter named Sophie. The brownstone was constantly full of noise and laughter, and the organized chaos of raising 3 kids. Knox stepped back from day-to-day operations at Thornton Industrial, promoting his COO to CEO while he took on a chairman role that allowed for more flexibility. On their 10th anniversary, they went back to the Grandstone Hotel again, a tradition they'd maintained over the years. The suite was exactly the same, and Harrison stood at the window where she'd once cleaned glass, looking out at the city. "Do you ever think about how differently things could have gone?" she asked as Knox joined her. "All the time. If you hadn't been assigned to my suite, if I hadn't invited you to see the park, if you'd turned down Richard's job offer." He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "But you were, and I did, and you didn't. And now we're here." "Now we're here," she echoed. They spent the evening reminiscing about their early days, laughing at how awkward they'd been, marveling at how much had changed. Harrison ran a successful hotel, Knox had found balance between work and life, and their children were growing up happy and loved. "You know what the best part is?" Knox said as they lay in bed that night. "What's that?" "I wake up every morning and get to choose you again, and you choose me back. After everything we've been through, all the challenges and changes, we keep choosing each other." Harrison rolled over to face him, her husband of 10 years, the man who'd seen her when she was invisible. "Always," she said. "I'll always choose you," and she meant it. Through the years that followed, through Emma's graduation, Lucas's wedding, Sophie's decision to join Thornton Industrial, through Knox's retirement and Harrison's expansion of the Grayson house into a small chain of luxury hotels, through everything that life threw at them, they chose each other. Years later, when their grandchildren asked how they met, Harrison and Knox would tell them the story of a hotel room, a stubborn CEO and a cleaning woman who wasn't afraid to tell him he was living like a vampire. The kids always laughed at that part, and Knox would pull Harrison close and say that she'd saved his life. But Harrison knew the truth. They'd saved each other. Knox had given her opportunity and belief in herself, and she'd given him permission to love again, to trust that the future could be as beautiful as the past. Their love story wasn't perfect. It was complicated and messy and built on the foundation of grief and struggle. But it was real, and it was theirs, and that made it absolutely perfect. On the day of their 40th anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren in the ballroom of the original Grayson house, Knox raised his glass for a toast. 40 years ago, I was hiding in a hotel room, convinced that the best part of my life was behind me. And then Harrison walked in with cleaning supplies and an attitude, and everything changed. He looked at his wife, still beautiful after all these years. "You taught me to live again, to trust again, to love again. You gave me a life I never thought I'd have, and I'm grateful for every single day." Harrison stood beside him, her own glass raised. "You saw me when I was invisible. You gave me a chance when no one else would. But more than that, you loved me for exactly who I was, and you helped me become who I was meant to be." She looked around the room at their family, the legacy they'd built together. "This is everything I never knew I wanted, and I wouldn't change a single moment." As their family applauded and the music started, Knox led Harrison onto the dance floor, just like he had at their wedding 40 years ago. They moved together with the ease of decades of partnership, 2 people who'd found each other in the most unexpected way and built something extraordinary. "I love you," Knox whispered as they danced. "I love you too," Harrison replied. Always have, always will. And in that moment, surrounded by the life they'd created together, they were exactly where they were meant to be. Two broken people who'd found healing in each other, who'd learned to trust and love and live again. Their story had started in a hotel room with cleaning supplies and exhaustion, but it had become something beautiful. A testament to the power of seeing and being seen, of taking chances, of choosing love even when it seemed impossible. That night, as they returned to their home, the same brownstone where they'd raised their children and built their life, Harrison thought about the woman she'd been at 25. Desperate, exhausted, invisible. And she thought about Knox hiding from the world in a hotel room, convinced his chance at happiness had died with his first wife. They'd both been wrong. Happiness hadn't been behind them. It had been waiting just around the corner in the most unexpected place, wearing the most unexpected face. Knox caught her smiling as they got ready for bed. "What are you thinking about? How lucky we are. How easily we could have missed each other." "But we didn't," he said, pulling her close. "And that makes all the difference." She leaned her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and knew he was right. They hadn't missed each other. Against all odds, despite grief and struggle and 1,000 reasons why it shouldn't have worked, they'd found each other. They'd learned to trust again, to love again, to believe in second chances. And that, Harrison thought as sleep pulled her under, was the greatest gift of all. Not the money or the success or even the family they'd built, though those were all wonderful. The greatest gift was the knowledge that love could survive anything, that healing was possible, that two broken people could become whole together. Their story was complete now, not because it was ending, but because every chapter had been written with love. And as they drifted off to sleep, still holding each other after 40 years of marriage, Harrison knew that this was the happy ending they'd both been searching for. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth it. Not the end, but a beautiful continuation of the life they'd chosen together. Knox had learned to love her, and in doing so, he'd learned to trust again. Harrison had taught him without even trying, simply by being herself, by seeing him for who he was beneath the wealth and the grief and the walls he'd built. And he had done the same for her, giving her the chance to become who she was always meant to be. Together, they'd created something neither could have imagined alone. A life full of love and laughter, challenge and triumph, grief and joy. A life that honored their pasts while embracing their future. A life that proved second chances were real, and love was always worth the risk.